All right, hey everybody. So we're going to talk today about homeostasis. So last Monday, you did an activity called Ben's Bad Day, where you looked at a day in the life of a college student. And what you were investigating was the different feedback loops that went on in Ben's body to help maintain his homeostasis. One thing that was repeated throughout the activity was that in every circumstance, Ben's nervous system was the first thing to sense a change in his environment and then to act. So we're going to look at how your nervous system interacts with the other systems in your body to help maintain your homeostasis, to keep you in balance. So let's review very quickly the levels of organization. Now, this is something that you learned in your cells unit. The first and smallest level of organization is the cell. The cell is the smallest unit of life. Groups of cells performing the same function make up tissues, and then groups of tissues working together form organs. So here we have a stomach. Different organs that are working toward one goal form organ systems, like the digestive system. And then all of the systems can group together to form an organism, in this case, a human. Now, it's very important that you recognize that all of your body systems are interdependent. If one body system isn't working properly, it's going to have a negative impact on other systems. Just think about any time that you have ever felt sick, or if any of you have broken a bone. That doesn't just affect your skeletal system. It's going to affect other systems around it. So the key systems that we're going to talk about are the nervous system, which is the electrical system, if you will. Its job is to sense changes, to send and receive messages, and to control your body's responses. So if I were taking notes, that's what I would write down. The function of the nervous system is to sense change, send and receive messages, and control responses. We have some major parts of the brain. We have the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. The brainstem is responsible for the sort of basic life functions, breathing and heart rate and things like that. The cerebellum helps to control things like balance and motor skills. And then the cerebrum is where most of the processing, the learning goes on. The nervous system works very closely with the endocrine system, which is like the chemical messenger system. So the brain, the nervous system, is the electrical system in your body, and the endocrine system is your chemical messages, your hormones. And so you can see here that I've got lots of different glands that are part of the endocrine system. We've got the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland. We have the pancreas, which you talked about a lot in the Ben's Bad Day activity, the adrenal glands, and then of course we have the reproductive glands. Your endocrine system, again, it produces the chemical messages, which are the hormones, to regulate your body's responses. If I were writing notes, that's what I would write down, that it produces chemical messages to regulate body's responses. And then finally, this isn't a slide, but there's one other system that's very important in making sure that these chemical messages get where they need to go. Do you know what body system carries the chemical messages from one place to another? It's the circulatory system. The circulatory system's job is to transport hormones to regulate your body's responses. I'm going to pause and I want to show you what my notes look like. Here, that I have written down the nervous system and what it does. I have written down the endocrine system and what it does. And I've written down the circulatory system and what it does. So if you need to take a minute and pause this video and go back, please do so. Now we're going to look at how a heater works, okay? It's getting a little cooler, probably not cold enough to turn on your heater yet, but we all know how these work, right? When the temperature of a room decreases, your thermostat will sense that the temperature has fallen below whatever the threshold is, and it will activate the heater. The heater will produce warm air, which is going to cause the temperature of the room to rise. When the sensors in the thermostat sense that the temperature has come back up, what's it going to do? It's going to shut off the heater. Well, once the heater is shut off, eventually we're going to go right back to that lower room temperature, right? And so as you can see, there is constant stimulus and response happening here. We have a decrease in room temperature, which is the stimulus, and then we have the activation of the heater, which is the response. This is called a feedback loop because, as you can see, there is a response to every stimulus. It continues. So let's talk about some key feedback loops in your body. Now, you are going to want to write these down in your notes just to have a note of these key feedback loops. So the first one that we're going to talk about is temperature regulation. So when your environment is hot, sensors in your brain will recognize that your body temperature has increased. And so your brain, specifically your hypothalamus, will activate and send a hormone to your skin. It will cause your skin to dilate and you can release sweat. And as you release that sweat, it's going to help to cool your body down. And then again, sensors in your brain will determine that you have cooled off and it will stop that sweating. Okay? Well, let's say that you go from being outside on a hot day to going inside to, maybe a campus building or something like that, where the air conditioner has been turned down to, 60 degrees or something. So you're going to immediately go from where you're sweating to somewhere where you're really cold, okay? So when your environment is cold, again, sensors in your brain, you have your brain here, which is the nervous system, and then your hypothalamus, which is the endocrine system, are going to determine that you are cold. They will release another hormone, again, to your skin and to your muscles. Only this time, it's not going to cause dilation and sweating. It's going to cause contractions. And so you will get shivering and goosebumps. And all of those are responses designed to help raise your internal body temperature. And then once that temperature increases, again, your brain will sense that and it will shut off the shivering and the goosebumps response. So pause for a minute if you need to so that you can have this feedback loop in your notes. The next feedback loop that we're going to look at is all about blood sugar regulation. So if your blood sugar is low, you're going to feel hungry. Your brain senses that change. The hypothalamus is going to act this time on your pancreas and your liver, which are going to release glucagon. Glucagon is a hormone that allows your cells to release glucose into the bloodstream. And so once that glucose is released into the bloodstream, your blood sugar levels will raise and your brain will sense that change and it will again shut off this response. Okay? So what happens if your blood sugar gets too high? In the video, in the Ben's Bad Day activity, it talked about how Ben downed a 2 liter of soda right before a party and he hadn't had anything to eat all day. So suddenly he's got high blood sugar. Well, his brain is going to sense that change and it's going to release the hormone insulin. And again, insulin is a hormone that almost acts like a key and it allows your muscles to take in more sugar. And so they're removing sugar from the bloodstream and that's going to drop your blood sugar. So take a minute again, pause if you need to, so that you can copy this feedback loop into your notes, and I am going to go ahead and move on. The last feedback loop that we're going to talk about is all about the water levels in your blood. So let's say you have a low water level in your blood. The first thing that's going to happen is that your brain is going to sense that change and you're going to feel thirsty. It's going to release a hormone called ADH, or anti-diuretic hormone. And this hormone is going to act on your kidneys. Your kidneys are the organ that's responsible for regulating how much water is released into your bloodstream, how much sugar, how much salt, all of that. So your kidneys will filter out less water. What I mean by that is they will hold on to water. And so what's going to happen is you're going to feel thirsty, you're going to urinate less, and that way, that is your body's way of helping to increase the water level in your blood. Obviously, this is a temporary response. If you don't get something to drink, you could make yourself really sick. So what about if you have a high water level in your blood? You've kept yourself very well hydrated. You've got lots of water in your system. We have, once again, sensors in our brain and our hypothalamus. So again, nervous and endocrine system. The hormone that's going to be released this time is just a diuretic hormone. And in this case, your kidneys will filter more water, which means that you're going to be releasing more water into your bladder and you're going to urinate more. And that's going to help to decrease the water levels in your blood. Okay, so one more time, pause if you need to so that you can have this feedback loop in your notes. Mine looks exactly like this, and I'm going to go ahead and move on. The last thing that we are going to talk about is the different types of feedback loops, okay? So what we've been talking about up until now is a negative feedback loop. So a negative feedback loop is one where the feedback eventually stops the response because you want to move back toward homeostasis, okay? Different from that is positive feedback. A positive feedback loop happens when the system enhances the changes that are being made to the system. So in a positive feedback loop, you're actually moving farther away from homeostasis. One example of this is the onset of contractions in childbirth. When contractions occur, there's a hormone released called oxytocin, and that's going to stimulate further contractions because the goal is to increase the contractions enough that the baby can get out of the mother. So we want to increase those contractions, even though it's moving the mother away from homeostasis. It's keeping those contractions going. The idea is to increase until she delivers that child. And so we have here, this is an example of that feedback loop. As the head of the fetus is pushing, it's going to cause those nerve impulses to be transmitted to the brain. The brain is going to stimulate the release of oxytocin from the pituitary gland. It's going to be carried in the bloodstream. So you see here we have nervous system, endocrine system, circulatory system. And then it's going to continue to stimulate further contractions, which will continue to push the baby toward the cervix. And it just increases and increases. Some other examples of positive feedback loop include blood clotting. And this is one you're probably all a little bit more familiar with, okay? If you get a cut, there are certain cells and proteins in your blood called platelets. And as platelets begin to stick together near the site of the injury, they actually release chemical messages that travel back to the brain and trigger the release of more blood. Now, what would be the reason for this? The reason that your body sends more blood to the injury site is so that, one, we can increase the number of platelets and close up the wound, and two, to increase the white blood cell count in that area, because white blood cells help to fight off any infection that might be there. And so this is why, if you've ever watched, a show where somebody is injured just in some grotesque way, one of the first things they'll say is to put pressure on the wound to try to stop the bleeding, because the body, the brain, is actually sending more blood to that area, which, in terms of eventually restoring homeostasis, that's a good thing. But if the injury is so severe, that person could actually bleed to death. And then the last example of a positive feedback loop involves lactation. As a mother breastfeeds, hormones are released from her milk ducts to increase the production of more milk. Okay, so I'm going to pause again, and I want to show you what my notes look like now. So we have here my definitions of negative and positive feedback loops. I have that a negative feedback loop eventually stops the response, that the goal is to get back to homeostasis, and some examples: the body temperature, blood sugar, and the blood osmolarity, the feedback loops that you copied down just a minute ago. And then a positive feedback loop continues the response, moves away from homeostasis. And the examples of those include bleeding, childbirth, and then breastfeeding. one last thing to talk about, and that is the idea of how structure and function relate to each other. So I have a few things here. One is just a picture of some nerve cells. So the job of the nerve cells is, again, to receive and send messages. And so what we have here is this larger body, which is where messages are received. And then we have sort of this long rope-like structure. This is where the chemical messages are sent, okay? And the structure of this allows those messages to be sent very, very quickly. It's almost like an electrical wire. It's very compact, and the message can shoot out to wherever it needs to go, okay? And then another example of structure and function is actually going to come from this video that I'm going to share with you.
Roam territories in Asia and Africa. The easiest way to tell the difference between them is to look at their ears. Asian elephants have smaller ears than African elephants. Natural selection makes each the right size. Elephant ears are actually giant cooling systems. As the elephants heat up, they are able to open more and more blood vessels in their ears. All 450 liters of an elephant's blood can be run through the ears in 20 minutes. Flapping their ears cools the blood before it returns to the body. African elephants, exposed to longer periods of sun, need bigger cooling systems than Asian elephants. Random changes in the genetic makeup of each species allowed them to evolve to suit their specific environments.
So what you see there is that the ears are not, it said they were cooling systems, and it's not just that they're flapping their ears to create some wind, it's that they have lots and lots of blood vessels in their ears. And so that when they open that up, those blood vessels are cooled off, and that allows the blood to be cooled, and then it helps to cool the elephant off. And it even mentioned how the African elephants, which are exposed to longer periods of sunlight, have larger ears than Asian elephants, which are not exposed to such long periods of sunlight. That's all that I have for today, guys. I hope that this was helpful.